Hello, and welcome to the Alonzo Says Show. I'm your host, Alonzo, and welcome to Alonzo Take on the World. Today's topic, I'm going to go off script, so to speak. I'm going to be pretty much speaking from the heart. Because there's a topic that, we're discussing on a daily basis, but nothing is being done about it. And that is, I'm here to speak to the black community. Now, if you take a look at the landscape across the United States, you'll see that the job market is shrinking, education is skyrocketing, and crime is rising as well. Now, I'll be the first to admit that racism does indeed play a role in this situation, but it's not the whole cake. There are different fractions in this. Racism, ignorance, and some of your own self-undoing. Now it's time for the black community to take responsibility for some of the action that's going on. You can't blame white America for it all the time, okay? Now, sure, you can go to the bank and you know that now racism now isn't blatant in the face. That's why you have a lot of individuals that say, well, racism like it is, they're pulling the race card. Racism, they have the same opportunities I do. No, it's not that cut and dry. It's almost like me and you running a race and you putting one hand behind my back and tying my leg up and say, now I expect you to run the same race I have, even though I'm not constricted like that. That is what racism look like. Now it's more in subtle way. It's more subtle. When you look at through banking loans, through job. If you walk out to your floor and you clearly don't see diversity, there's something wrong. Now you have someone that say, well, I should be able to hire whoever I want to. That is correct. But you also should be, if you're going to be blatant like that, where you're not going to have diversity, then you should also put a sign up saying that I don't hire people of color. And then your company don't be public. This is private for people, white people only. Okay? That's what you should do. But a lot of them don't have that balls to do that. You know why? Because most bigots will hide behind. They're cowards when it comes to facing it. That's what makes them. I love America. And thank God I've had the opportunity to have great black, white, Asian, Hispanic friends, because there's a fraction of white America that rejects racism in all forms. We can talk about civil rights and the people who came before us and died, marched, beaten. But all through all that, none of that would have came to fruition as far as civil rights laws and racial discriminatory laws putting out there without a fraction of white America's help. Those are not my friends. Those are my brothers and sisters, and I love you. And I want to thank you because they put their neck on line because they said this isn't right and I'm not going to support it and I'm going to march with them because I want them to be treated the same way that I'm treated. You have some people who work for people who was their boss and they say, yes sir, yes sir, yes sir. And they, or Mr. whatever, or Mrs. whatever, they say, no, you call me Frank. You're a man just like I am. And you have to love those fractions of white Americans who sitting just kicked out racism. They wouldn't have no part of it. Most of the time you take a look over, like I said, over there at Fox News and a lot of bigoted white America, Tea Parties. Most of them, like the Tea Parties, most of them are 45 years or more. So they're used to racism. So when they see something that doesn't look like them, that they feel like it infringes upon their advancement, then they're going to fight against it. Okay? These so-called people who are Christians, Christian now, well, God tells you love everybody, especially children. You're seeing them right now at the border, sitting there screaming obscenities at kids. Racial obscenities. And talking about shooting them. Kids who just trying to leave a tragic situation, crime-ridden situation for a better life in America. And they're sitting there at the border with that. And most of them people right there, they'll sit and tell you that racism doesn't exist. You're the one who's pulling the race card. But most of the ones who say that are not ones who contributed to racial harmony or racial balance. Most of those people either the ones who supports it or engaging in it. That's a fact. Okay? Now, I'm not saying that everybody, you gotta like every black person in the world, because I don't. Just like I don't like every white person in the world. But I don't look at people based on their race. I look at them as an individual. Because there's some white people that, my brothers and sisters, I love them like they're my own. Like my own family. And there's some black people I just can't stand. But they ain't got nothing to do with their color. They got something to do with their character. Okay? And black community, as I said, you have to take responsibility for what you're doing. You look at all that violence up there in Chicago. People getting killed. Just murder rate up, just skyrocketed out of ignorance. Ignorance. You know, we'll have our vigils and have Al Sharpton to sit there and go and from the network and go and talk to people, and they'll march. None of that means anything if you're not putting on work for it. These vigils that you're having in the community with these flowers and all this other stuff, none of that matters if nobody's going to sit there and stick their foot out there and start trying to turn this trend around. Because what happens is that it's becoming a problem for our next generation. And the next generation, I'm kind of disgusted with to some extent, where I love them because they're my family. But on the same token, you ask these people who their senators are, they couldn't tell you. You ask them about certain laws, they couldn't tell you about it. They'll tell you, my excuse is, oh, I don't get into politics. I don't care about stuff like that. You don't care about something that has a value to you now and going to have an effect on the proposals and the laws that they pass. You don't care about any of that. That's foolish of you. But yet though, you can have these same individuals who, if you ask them who Rick Ross is and Nicki Minaj is, and what's the latest iPhone, what's the latest new gadget, what's the latest fashion trend, or you look on Instagram and Facebook, and you having these people sitting there having these ratchet fights and stuff that they're sitting there promoting, or girls that sitting there turning and shaking their ass and twerking, and that's garnering more likes than somebody who's sitting saying something that's more political, something more educational. And I fault this generation of parenting, because a lot of them, they're having kids young, so they don't know. And a lot of them wasn't taught, but that's no excuse for you not to learn. Now, you have a lot of situations where you know that racism is playing a role in it. And yes, unfortunately, you have to sometimes do work 2 and 3 times than your white counterpart just to get the same acclimate or rewards. And it's unfortunate, but with the help of a good portion of white America, the younger generation of white Americans coming up, and they're rejecting that, saying, hey, if you can make me some money, I don't care what color it is, you can make me some green. Well, I don't care. You know, I was up in New Jersey, up in Asbury Park, and unlike in Pennsylvania, in certain parts of Pennsylvania, I'm walking around in Pennsylvania, these people see you coming, they want to cross the street, or they see their purse, they want to snatch it because they think you're going to steal them. Probably most of them don't even have no money in anyway. Or they ain't never had their purse stolen from a person of color. But the ignorance that they've been taught has taught them to live like that. But I was in Connecticut, and these white Americans was walking around, and they were walking around just like me and you. They didn't give you a care thought, and they didn't act like they was afraid of you. But I happened to be in Asbury Park, where there seems to be almost a melting pot, almost like a San Francisco, a melting pot, where you have people of all colors and sexual orientation and religious background. They were all inclusive, and these people got along. It was just beautiful. The 5 days I was there, it was just absolutely beautiful. The relationship that these people had together, where they walked by and said hello, spoke to you, talked to you, and there was no other intent in there. Now, I'm not saying that the whole area is perfect. Sure, I'm quite sure that there were some people in there that probably won't see you there, but it wasn't the majority. If you took Asbury and made them the majority of the United States, we wouldn't have half the race problem that we have. They are a beacon of example of how race relations can and do work. Okay? Now, as I stated before, racism exists. And the only reason why it hasn't been stamped out because a big portion of white America do not want to address it. American history has to be taught. American history, not white American history, because that's what's been taught. When I was coming up, the person who I learned about was George Washington Carver and Martin Luther King. Only when I left home and was able to expand did I learn about Malcolm X and Shabazz and Marcus Garvey and a whole lot of Maya Angelou and a whole lot of intelligent, intellectual Black Americans who's contributed to America's success, because slaves contributed to American success. They just never got the credit for it. You gotta understand one thing. This is when Nathan say, it angers me when I hear him say, oh, well, we want to take America back. From where? This is Indian territory. If anybody should want to take something back, it should be their Indians. Unfortunately, they was relegated to the reservation. And as you see now, half of them are drunk, uneducated, and crime is rampant. African Americans was pretty much almost relegated, but it was called the projects. Look up the word projects and see what it means. It pretty much means experiment. The only difference was that Black Americans could not be caged in. Okay? And so they expanded mentally, physically, has been in the projects. So we understand our Indian brothers and what they went through. You know, and don't get me wrong, I'm not a Republican, I'm not a Democrat, I'm not an independent. But the Republicans are right in some regards when they sit and say, you know, the Democrats keep the voters by giving them handouts. Now, to me, it's the difference between help and handout. Help is when you need it. When you have kids at home that need to be fed, and you have your bills need to be paid, and you're in a financial quadrant, that's help, and they give you help. Handout is when you have the ones who sit at home and have those babies, who sit there and don't want to work, whereas they're getting the government is giving you just enough for you to stay where you're at and give them their votes, but not enough to succeed in life, to be better than what you are. So that's why you have people some of the people that lives in the project, that they exceed those expectations through education, and they make it out of there. Whereas you have the rest of them that stay in there, and they let 2 Chainz and all these other rappers sit there and sell them their so-called grief. I'm selling you your own grief that you live in every day. But most of the time, by the time these guys get platinum, or all these contracts, they're living in some mansion in the suburbs. They're no longer living there. They're no longer selling you. They're no longer living that struggle that they're selling you. Okay? So, music has, to me, music, fashion, it has, and twerking, all those has its place, but it shouldn't be your top notch. You getting out of there and you stopping violence and you stopping the ignorance that's just plaguing us. Because like I said, sometimes we're our own worst enemy. And like I said, I'll be the first to say racism plays a role. But so does ignorance, and you're sitting there just doing dumb stuff. Stuff that you can think about. It's just repulsive. And I call for action for people to sit there and start coming together and getting in classrooms and getting your education. Demand more education. Parents need to go and demand better books from the school district, because they don't. Some of those bigger school districts, they don't respect you anyway. They think half the people in the black community, they dumb anyway. So why pour money in there when they're overlooking those ones whose shining example of when they leave a school, a poor area, and then thrive in a white district? My son is a prime example of that. He's an A student, straight A, honor student. His environment didn't change who he was. His intelligence was there. So don't make excuses that, oh, well, you know, I'm in a bad area, so I can't do no better. Yes, you can if you want to. Okay? Parents got to get in there and start going to PTA meetings, getting involved with their kids. And then on the same token, you all need to start having to where there's centers where kids can go and play and hone their talents, whether that's music and sports and educational, academics. There needs to be places of that nature where these kids can go to instead of letting the streets raise your kid. Because what the street, when you educate in school, you're going off to college. You're going off to better things, trying to make a career for yourself. Whereas the streets raise your kid, and he's going to graduate to prison, a life of crime, or death. Because everybody know on the streets has everything on the streets has an expiration date. And you don't want your kid to be one of those. So I'm calling on the black community to get together and raise these kids and teach them something different than what they're being taught. Don't let television raise your kids. 106 & Park should not be your kids' educational piece. Cornel West, Tavis Smiley, people of that nature, they should sit down and listen to them just for a few minutes to raise their mental awareness. Because I love them. And don't blame all white America, because all white America don't want to see you not succeed. You have some of them that'll give you a better handshake than your own black counterpart. So don't use that as, oh, the white man. Don't say the white man. There's a segment of white society that don't want you to succeed. And they're putting in their work every day. Look at the Koch Industries. Look at Sarah Palin. Look at Ann Coulter. Look at Sean Hannity. Look at all of them who sit there and they'll use, and Dick Cheney who will sit there and use race every single time to sit there and knock you down a couple of levels to succeed at what they're trying to get. And that is to isolate you, to completely isolate you. Raise your awareness. But I love the white Americans who walking hand in hand with us, who want to see us succeed, who don't see you as a color, they see you as an individual, and they want to see you exceed just like they do. Please, ladies and gentlemen, subscribe to my channel. Sound off on my Facebook and my Twitter and my website, and tell me what you think. And there will be more discussions in the future on this topic. On that note, you all have a great evening. Take care of yourself. God bless America. And good afternoon.